Donald Trump está atacando una y otra vez al estado de Florida. Yo me pregunto, ¿será que los votantes floridianos se estarán dando cuenta? ¿Será que finalmente, tras todos los sucesos, veremos un cambio en el comportamiento electoral en este estado? El viernes de la semana pasada, la Corte Suprema, hablamos de una corte que él mismo ha moldeado, autorizó a Trump a proceder con deportaciones masivas de migrantes provenientes de Cuba, Haití, Nicaragua, Venezuela, etc. Y ojo que esto no es una casualidad porque es parte de una política mucho más amplia, una política que ya había comenzado hace semanas. Recuerden, la misma corte impulsada por él revocó el estatus de protección temporal para los venezolanos. Vamos a hacerles un poco de recuerdo de qué se trata.
Told you about before the break, the Supreme Court has just cleared the Trump administration to temporarily end humanitarian parole protections for 500,000 immigrants. The justices lifted these protections for migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez. Camila, what more can you tell us about this ruling?
Hi, Mugo. This ruling will place 500,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela in legal limbo and will allow the Trump administration to terminate their parole, legal status, and also their work permits that have allowed them to live and work in the U.S. legally, but on a temporary basis. These are migrants from these four crisis-stricken countries who were allowed to legally come to the U.S. under a Biden administration program that was designed to discourage them from crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. But the Trump administration, Mugo, has argued that this policy was unlawful, that it was an abuse of this humanitarian parole policy that the Biden administration used on a very unprecedented scale, and that it needed to be terminated. And now the Supreme Court is allowing the administration to revoke that legal status and now to place these migrants at risk of deportation. The caveat is that some of these migrants, Mugo, may be able to stay here through other means because they have applied for other immigration benefits like asylum or a green card. Cubans, for example, can be eligible for permanent residency or a green card under a Cold War era law, and so those migrants will not be eligible for deportation. But anyone who does not have another immigration status can now be deported from the U.S., and the administration has made this warning very clear. If you are here illegally, you must self-deport. If not, you could face arrest and deportation from the country.
Yeah, a big ruling there from the Supreme Court affecting thousands of people. Wow, Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much for your reporting. Now let's go to CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. Jessica, can you help us break down this ruling?
Yeah, and great reporting by Camila. So what we have here is the Supreme Court granting the Trump administration's emergency request to say, pause the lower court ruling. I know it feels like I say this almost every day now, where we're talking about lower court rulings, what they say, and whether or not they will go into effect. But what we have here is a lower court, a trial court, that said that the Trump administration's attempt to terminate this parole program, that it could not go into effect while the case is being played out. The Trump administration essentially emergency appealed first up to the circuit court, then up to the Supreme Court. And what we have is the Supreme Court today saying, okay, we're going to pause that lower court decision, meaning the Trump administration's desire to end this particular program will be in effect, meaning the program is ended for now. I do want to caution that this isn't a final ruling on the merits from the trial court, from the circuit court, or from the Supreme Court.
So, Jessica, just a quick clarification for me here. Does the case then still go on? Or what's...
So, yes, it looks to me like, and of course this is a breaking news story, that the case does still go on.
Okay.
The Trump administration had argued that the case can't go on because this is not judicially reviewable, meaning that they have the power to say, we're ending this program. The Trump administration had said, again, judges essentially have no particular role here. But I think this is just the Supreme Court. It looks like by 7-2, we have dissents by Justice Sotomayor and Justice Jackson, very lengthy and vigorous dissents, saying the program goes into effect for now. It could meaning the end of the program goes into effect for now. And this could be where we end up long term.
Okay, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for helping us break that down. Appreciate it.
Aquí es donde yo me pregunto, ¿será que los votantes latinos en Florida no ven esto? ¿No ven que Trump está persiguiendo precisamente a las comunidades que más han huido del autoritarismo? No se trata solo de los migrantes sin papeles, porque la agencia migratoria ha estado haciendo redadas en obras de construcción en ciudades con una alta tasa de latinos. Han estado persiguiendo a personas que están trabajando legalmente, que están construyendo y contribuyendo al país. Muchos de ellos, ojo, no tienen antecedentes penales, tampoco tienen órdenes judiciales. Aún así los persiguen como si fuesen criminales. Eso no es todo, porque la situación climática también es alarmante. Estamos entrando en una temporada de huracanes que ya se perfila como una de las más activas y destructivas de la historia reciente. ¿Qué está haciendo Trump al respecto? Ha estado recortando fondos a FEMA, la agencia que más bien debería ayudar a los estados en estos momentos de desastres. Y ojo, que esto no lo digo como una crítica sin fundamentos. Trump no solo ha mostrado desinterés ante las tragedias ocurridas en estados como Missouri o como Kentucky. Es más, directamente ha dicho que quiere eliminar FEMA. Escuchen.
I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good. I think when you have a problem like this, I think you want to go and, whether it's a Democrat or Republican governor, you want to use your state to fix it and not waste time.
Él lo dijo. Ahí está el video. Lo peor es que estamos viendo estas consecuencias. Hace poco despidió al administrador de esta agencia simplemente porque se atrevió a decir en una audiencia del Congreso que la agencia era necesaria. Lo despidió por decir la verdad. Señores, esta es la realidad que se está viviendo. Mientras científicos alertan sobre tormentas más intensas debido al cambio climático, Trump está desmantelando las instituciones que más bien deberían prepararnos. Ha recortado personal técnico, ha eliminado radares meteorológicos, ha despedido expertos que llevan años estudiando patrones de huracanes. Tenemos varias catástrofes simultáneas y simplemente no habrá cómo responder.
Jacob, tell me what you've found about what is going inside this agency that seems to be pretty clearly targeted for destruction.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. I mean, you heard what the president said and what Kristi Noem said. That's very publicly stated opposition to keeping this agency going. But I think that they realized, it is fair to say, that getting rid of FEMA 2 days before hurricane season, where we are today, would be a very, very, very bad idea. And so the career professionals inside this agency who first pushed the original acting director of the Federal Emergency Management Administration, Cameron Hamilton, who was promptly fired a day after he went up to the Hill and said that he ultimately believed that FEMA was in the best interest of the American people. Now, David Richardson, the new acting director of FEMA, to essentially put a memo in front of Kristi Noem that says there are over 2,600 core employees, that's the acronym they use for the people who lead the rapid response and recovery on the back end of disasters, whether it's a hurricane or a fire or any other mass casualty event. And they're basically signing these people back up, whereas 2 weeks ago, those people may not have been at FEMA or inside this agency at this point. Doesn't mean they've had a full 180 and they're now supporting FEMA. They rejected, as you pointed out, that North Carolina disaster declaration from the White House just a couple of days ago, President Trump did. But some of the key functions, the core functions of this agency are going to remain in place for now. And that is because of pressure from careers inside on the politicals to say, if something goes wrong during hurricane season, effectively, it will be on you, President Trump and Kristi Noem.
So I have to confess, I know a little bit, I've reported on emergency management and disasters a bit, and I know that there's been a lot of, through the years, critiques of FEMA, reforms for it. I mean, because it's such a fraught undertaking, and it's such an important thing to do, and it's often very, very messy. There's lots of folks that have beefs with FEMA one way or the other. I don't think I quite understand why they're so obsessed with getting rid of it altogether.
Yeah, nor do the people inside. I think if you talk to people at FEMA, Chris, they'll tell you FEMA is in need of reforms to the bureaucracy. The way that FEMA, in these major disaster declarations that the president will approve, whether it was Joe Biden approving 100% reimbursement for the LA wildfires or the North Carolina hurricanes, or a bunch of them that President Trump has approved over the course of just the last couple of days, and they were sort of backlogged since the beginning of the administration, perhaps yet another recognition that this agency is necessary. This happens, the formula is determined because of the Stafford Act, and it is by statute. Localities are entitled to 75% reimbursement of all of the money that they spend on these disasters by FEMA. Anything above that, up to 90%, is determined by a formula that's in place. And if these states don't meet the formula, it's up to the discretion of the President of the United States. And there's an ongoing conversation inside of FEMA as to what the right percentage is for states and localities to shoulder on their own, because some in Washington, D.C. feel like it creates more efficiencies on the ground in these localities to move faster, to get the job done quicker. But doing it this way could literally bankrupt states, according to the Biden administration's FEMA chief of staff, Michael Cohen, who I talked to as we reported this article. He said there are states, particularly in the South, that if they don't budget for this, if they don't put this in their state budget, if they don't take out a bond, if they don't increase tax revenue, a major disaster without the supplemental income from the federal government could actually put these states upside down entirely financially, which creates a whole nother disaster of a man-made variety.
You report that Noem has been quietly pushing behind the scenes to keep key employees in place to approve reimbursements to states previously hit by disaster. That there were a bunch, quite notably, that were just sort of getting no response. Missouri, which had tornadoes, if I'm not mistaken, around the St. Louis metro area. Josh Hawley sort of like pleading with Noem in a hearing. It looks like some things have moved there, but again, I got to imagine the people inside the agency, it must be hard to do the normal work you have to do with the amount of chaos and disruption happening inside there.
The analogy that one, and it's in the story, one current FEMA employee gave me is, it's like running a relay race that you are supposed to have 6 people with 4 people. Yes, they will make it to the finish line, but getting all the way there and doing it in a timely manner is a lot more difficult and a lot more complicated. And that's the situation the Trump administration now has created for disaster response and recovery in the United States of America. It could be a lot easier than it's going to be this hurricane season, but because of what they have done, not only to FEMA, but to NOAA, they got rid of the $1 billion disaster registry. They got rid of all kinds of these National Weather Service meteorologists. It's going to be a whole lot more difficult this season.
Oh, well, fingers crossed here. Jacob Soboroff, thank you. Great reporting.
Luego está el tema de la salud. Más de 5 millones de floridanos dependen prácticamente del Obamacare. Son personas que no tienen un trabajo con seguro médico, que trabajan por su cuenta, o que simplemente no tienen otra opción. Y Trump está haciendo todo lo posible para destruir eso también. Amigos, la última propuesta republicana, que es respaldada por él, va a recortar este programa. Sube los precios a los seguros, elimina los créditos fiscales que ayudan a familias trabajadoras. Lo aprobaron en horas de la madrugada, sin debate, sin transparencia, como si supieran que es una traición al pueblo estadounidense. Realmente yo no entiendo cómo es que la gente no puede ver todo esto. Y muchos que sí lo ven y siguen creyendo que Trump está del lado de la gente común. Recordemos que él prometió bajar el costo de vida. ¿Y qué hemos visto en estos primeros meses de este segundo mandato? Subidas de precios, caos económico, y ahora incluso senadores republicanos como Rick Scott empiezan a decir que están preocupados por la deuda. Si hablamos de inmigración, yo tengo que detenerme en algo que duele profundamente. No hay muchos casos, amigos. el de Marilio Ambrosio, si no me equivoco, padre de 5 hijos, pastor, sin antecedentes criminales, detenido y separado de su familia. El de Heidi Sánchez, madre cubana deportada a un país que ya no considera suyo, separada de su bebé lactante. Hay un video ahí circulando llorando en una videollamada con su esposo desde un lugar donde no tiene ni casa. Ahora yo les pregunto, ¿es esto lo que querían? ¿Es esto lo que vienen a buscar cuando más bien huyen del autoritarismo? Y eso lo digo los latinos. Yo sé que muchas personas dicen, yo apoyo a Trump, pero no en inmigración. El tema en el que no lo apoyas es literalmente el que está destruyendo tu vida. Entonces, ¿qué sentido tiene eso? Biden, Obama, ellos al menos trataron de darles algo de dignidad, ¿no? Darles papeles, darte un seguro médico. En cambio, Trump te está mandando de regreso a los dictadores de los que huiste. Te está quitando el TPS, te está deportando sin juicio, te está separando de tus hijos, de tu familia. Y aún así muchos siguen creyendo que él es el Salvador. Por si fuese poco, ahora Trump también está cumpliendo su promesa a los multimillonarios petroleros que financiaron su campaña. Les dijo, si me dan 1.000 millones, les voy a cumplir. Y les está cumpliendo. Ha desmantelado las políticas de energía limpia. Eliminó los incentivos para los paneles solares. Y ahora las cuentas de luz, pues poco a poco veremos cómo suben, ¿no? En todo el país. Como si fuese todo esto no lo suficiente, también está atacando ahora el Servicio Meteorológico Nacional, a todo el aparato científico que es el que ayuda a prepararse para huracanes. Ha estado despidiendo expertos, quitando instrumentos de medición, debilitando la capacidad de respuesta ante desastres naturales. Y amigos, todo esto es lo que está pasando hoy, en este momento. Mientras tanto, por ejemplo, en Florida, muchos de ellos, los votantes, aún siguen creyendo que Trump está de su lado. Pero no lo está. Está gobernando para los ricos, para los poderosos, para una ideología de extrema derecha, la que desmantela todo lo que se necesita, todo lo que una familia trabajadora necesita para poder vivir con dignidad. La verdad es que no hay otro interés aquí que decir la verdad. Y la verdad, amigos, es que lo que se está viendo es una regresión brutal, una destrucción metódica de todo lo que alguna vez se protegió para los más vulnerables en el país. Él no está defendiendo a Florida, la está traicionando. Yo les pregunto, ¿cuándo se van a dar cuenta? Pues bueno, señores, ahora pasemos a hablar de un tema que puede sonar un poco, diría técnico, ¿no? Pero que esto tiene un poco de implicaciones para la democracia, para el Estado de Derecho. El uso del poder presidencial para intimidar, para castigar, para manipular a las firmas de abogados que simplemente no se arrodillaron ante Donald Trump. Prácticamente, pues Trump ha lanzado una especie de vendetta legal, una venganza en contra de los despachos de abogados de renombre que no quisieron seguir el juego. Y lo más preocupante, algunos de esos despachos cedieron. ¿Por qué? ¿Por miedo? ¿Por interés? ¿Por cálculo político? Ahora están pagando las consecuencias. Pero bueno, no me crean a mí. Vamos a ver un fragmento de lo que se dijo. Escuchen.
You've gone after law firms because they've employed people you don't like or they have represented people you don't like.
These are the biggest, most powerful lawyers. These are not
You got a
people
lot of
that are
leverage as
easily
president.
intimidated.
As president, you got all the cards.
They paid hundreds of millions of dollars because they felt, I guess, they probably felt they did something wrong.
It was for survival, sir.
No, it isn't.
You're
No,
crushing their business.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. The targets of Donald Trump's revenge tour are faced with a major decision over and over again. Go along with what the wannabe autocrat demands and hope for the best, or stand your ground, hope the courts see it your way, and fight. When it comes to Trump's attack on the big law firms, we saw several firms take that first path, the path of appeasing Donald Trump in exchange for a social media post announcing a deal. Those deals in and of themselves have turned out to be moving targets up for interpretation, but it was a choice to avoid crisis by their telling. But according to brand new reporting in the Wall Street Journal, the firms who did not do that, the firms who did not bow to Donald Trump's petty, since ruled illegal and unconstitutional attacks, are now seeing business benefits for their political courage. Quote, support for the law firms that did not make deals has been growing inside the offices of corporate executives. At least 11 big companies are moving work away from law firms that settled with the administration or are giving or intend to give more business to the firms that have been targeted but refuse to strike deals. That's according to general counsels at those companies and other people familiar with those decisions. Among them are technology giant Oracle, investment bank Morgan Stanley, an airline, and a pharmaceutical company. Microsoft expressed reservations about working with a firm that struck a deal, and another such firm stopped representing McDonald's in a case a few months before a scheduled trial. We saw 9 firms reach deals with the White House in recent months. 4 firms fought back and sued. Of those 4, judges have struck down the orders against 3 of them, and 1 is temporarily blocked. Most recently, the judge who ruled against Donald Trump's executive order against the law firm Wilmer Hale, a judge appointed by George W. Bush, writes a scathing opinion that included 27 exclamation points. He wrote in part, quote, I have concluded that this order must be struck down in its entirety as unconstitutional. Indeed, to rule otherwise would be unfaithful to the judgment and vision of the founding fathers. So there are the legal victories in taking on the president. And now with this Wall Street Journal report, clear evidence of a business advantage, business victories as well. More from the Journal reporting, quote, in interviews, general counsels expressed concern about whether they could trust law firms that struck deals to fight for them in court and in negotiating big deals if they weren't willing to stand up for themselves against Donald Trump. The general counsel of a manufacturer of medical supplies said that if firms facing White House pressure, quote, don't have a hard line, they don't have any line at all, end quote. That is where we start the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Voting rights attorney, founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias is here. He's a former partner at Perkins Coie. Also joining us, investigative reporter for the New York Times, Mike Schmidt is here. Mike, you had the original reporting on the executive orders against the firms that capitulated and the ones that went to court and prevailed. And I guess my question for you, is there any remorse being communicated to you from the firms that went down and capitulated to Donald Trump?
Well, there have been consequences for those firms. So Paul Weiss just a week ago lost 4 of their top partners who decided to start their own law firm and to leave. And so that is a major consequence because those lawyers had big clients and may take those clients with them. We know about dissent amongst associates. We know dissent amongst partners, about partners at Paul Weiss who didn't want Paul Weiss to do what they did. But this is an important story because understanding the fallout from these deals was always going to take time. A firm like Paul Weiss insisted that they had no choice, that this executive order was existential, and that if they didn't reach the deal, they would have, essentially gone out of business or ceased to exist in the form that they're in. And what we're going to see in the coming months is whether that is true or not. In this instance, and what it looks like sort of early on here in the first few months, is that if you were a firm that fought, you were not only able to legally survive, but you were seen more favorably amongst fellow law firms and amongst companies. And I think that comes back to something actually very basic about lawyers and law firms, which is that if you want to hire a lawyer to represent you, you want them to be a zealous advocate for you, to do everything to add.
Lo que acabamos de escuchar es el reflejo de algo muy importante. Cuando una figura con tanto poder como Trump intenta aplastar la independencia legal solo y por puro capricho político, estamos frente a una amenaza autoritaria, no una diferencia de opinión. ¿Qué es lo que hizo exactamente? Emitió órdenes ejecutivas dirigidas a firmas de abogados que habían representado a inmigrantes, a organizaciones progresistas o simplemente a clientes que a él no le gustaron. El castigo, intentar quitarlos del mapa legalmente. Presionarlos para hacer acuerdos a cambio de no ser perseguidos. Lo peor es que algunas firmas tuvieron que aceptar, que acordaron publicar mensajes en redes sociales, ofrecer trabajo legal gratuito a causas de administración, o sea, básicamente vender su independencia por un poco de paz momentánea. Pero el problema es que cuando tú haces un trato con alguien como Trump, nunca sabes si es que va a usar esa deuda en tu contra. Hoy, por ejemplo, te pide un tweet, mañana te exige que represente sus intereses personales. Y bien como lo dicen, ¿no? Esos acuerdos eran vagos, sin contratos reales. O sea, todo esto era basado en lo que Trump cree que le deben. O sea, es decir, estás atrapado con alguien que puede cambiar las reglas cuando él quiera. Ahora sé que hay alguien que dirá, bueno, esas firmas lo hicieron por supervivencia. Trump podría acabar con ellas. Y sí, amigos, el miedo es comprensible. Pero hay algo mucho más importante que la supervivencia empresarial y es la credibilidad. Porque ahora esos despachos no solo están perdiendo clientes, también están perdiendo la confianza del público y del mundo corporativo. ¿A quién vas a contratar para que te defienda en una batalla legal que sea seria? ¿A alguien que se arrodilló ante Trump? ¿O, por ejemplo, a un bufete de abogados que le plantó cara, que fue a juicio y ganó encima? Además, cuando los jueces, incluyendo jueces republicanos, que son nombrados, por ejemplo, por Bush, empiezan a decir que las órdenes de Trump eran inconstitucionales, el mensaje queda muy claro. Esto no fue una estrategia política, fue un abuso de poder. Así que sí, amigos, esto va mucho más allá de lo legal. Este es un ejemplo de cómo Trump intenta manipular a las instituciones para su propio beneficio. La justicia, los medios y ahora hasta los abogados. Y lo hace con amenazas, con castigos, con presión desde el poder. Eso no es el liderazgo, eso es autoritarismo. Pero bueno, señores, quiero saber qué opinan ustedes. ¿Creen que estas firmas hicieron bien en ceder para sobrevivir? ¿O piensan que deberían haber peleado, aunque eso significara perder contratos? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda suscribirte, darle like al video y compártelo con tus amigos. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.